Wyatt Callahan's hands were already bleeding when he heard her. Not a scream. Something worse. A sound a person makes when they've stopped believing anyone is coming. He ran. And what he found under that old canvas cloth in the heat of a Texas summer evening would change everything he thought he knew about mercy, rage, and what a man is truly capable of when the world gives him no other choice. If this story moves you, subscribe, stay until the end, and drop your city in the comments. Let's see how far this ride takes us. The summer of 1874 had been brutal. Not just hot, punishing. The kind of heat that cracked leather and turned creek beds to dust and made even the toughest ranch hands short-tempered and hollow-eyed by the time the sun dipped low. Out on the Callahan Spread, 12 miles east of Red Rock Flats, the land had gone dry as bone by July. The grass was brown. The windmill groaned every night like something in pain. Wyatt Callahan didn't mind it much. He'd grown up in worse. He was 34 years old, built lean and hard from years of ranch work, with hands that had been split open and healed so many times the scars had scars. He wasn't a talkative man, wasn't much for town, for saloons, for the kind of easy socializing that seemed to come natural to other men. He did his work. He fed his horses. He kept his rifle clean, and his conscience, more or less, clear. That evening, he'd just finished hauling water to the South Trough when he heard it. At first he thought it was the wind. The wind out there in summer did strange things. Picked up sound from half a mile away and brought it in close, distorted and mournful. He'd heard cattle lowing that sounded like children crying. He'd heard the creak of a fence post that sounded like a man calling his name. But this wasn't the wind. He stood still, bucket still in hand, and listened. It came again. Low, broken, barely there, but human. A sound caught somewhere between a gasp and a sob, pressed down tight like something trying not to be heard and unable to stop itself. Wyatt set the bucket down slow. His eyes moved across the yard. The barn to his left, door half open. The old storage shed on the far end, the one he hadn't used in 2 seasons. The cottonwood trees beyond that, their leaves bone dry and rattling in the faint evening breeze. He walked toward the shed, not running, not yet. He'd learned a long time ago that running toward an unknown sound was how men got themselves killed. He moved careful, one hand near the Colt on his hip, eyes scanning the ground, the shadows, the edges of everything. The shed door was pushed slightly inward, not broken, pushed, like someone had squeezed through. He reached out and pulled it open the rest of the way. The smell hit him first. Blood and sweat and something else. Fear, maybe. The kind of fear that soaks into a person's skin and stays there. Then he saw the canvas. An old piece of wagon cover, heavy and stiff with summer dust, crumpled against the back wall in a way that didn't look like any pile of cloth he'd ever left there. It moved. Just barely. A small, shuddering movement, like something underneath it trying to breathe and failing. Wyatt crossed the shed in 3 steps and dropped to one knee. "Hey," he said, keeping his voice low and steady. "Hey, I'm going to lift this. Don't be scared." He pulled the canvas back. His heart stopped. A woman lay curled beneath it, young, maybe mid-20s, with dark hair matted to her face and both hands pressed flat against the ground, like she was trying to hold herself to the earth. Her dress was torn at the shoulder. There was a cut above her left eyebrow, dried blood tracking down the side of her face in a dark, ugly line. Her lip was split. Her knuckles were raw. But it was her eyes that hit him hardest. She was looking straight at him, and in those eyes, Gray, he noticed, pale gray like storm clouds. There was something that went beyond fear. It was the look of a person who had been terrified so long that the terror had started to settle into something quieter and more terrible than panic. It was the look of someone who had stopped expecting to be saved. "Don't," she whispered. Her voice was wrecked, barely sound at all. "Don't, please don't touch me." "I'm not going to hurt you," Wyatt said. He kept his hands visible, one on his knee, one open at his side. "My name is Wyatt Callahan. This is my land. You're safe." She stared at him, didn't move. "I mean it," he said. "I don't know who you're running from or what happened to you, but you're safe right now. I promise you that." Something flickered in her face. Not trust, not yet, but the faint, desperate possibility of it. "Can you tell me your name?" he asked. She swallowed. It seemed to cost her something. "Clara," she said finally. "Clara Bennett." "All right, Clara." He didn't move toward her, didn't reach out, just stayed where he was, steady and still, letting her take her time. "Can you tell me if you're hurt bad? Anything broken?" She thought about it. Actually thought about it, like the question required real effort. "My ribs," she said. "Right side. And my ankle. I don't think it's broken, but—" She stopped, pressed her lips together. "It hurts to walk." "Okay," he nodded. "I'm going to help you get inside. You can say no, but you need water, and you need to sit somewhere that isn't a dirt floor. And my house is 30 yards from here." She looked at him for a long moment, the kind of look that took measure of a man. Then she nodded. Getting her to the house took longer than it should have. She was small, barely came up to his shoulder, but she carried herself like a woman who had been taught not to lean on anybody, and she fought against the instinct to accept help with every step. When he put his arm around her to take the weight off her ankle, she went rigid for just a second before she made herself relax, and he felt that, felt her forcing herself to permit it. And it told him more about what she'd been through than anything she might have said. He settled her into the chair nearest the kitchen table and lit the lamp. In the full light, she looked worse. The cut above her eye needed cleaning. The bruising along her jaw was deep and already yellowing at the edges, which meant it was at least a day old, maybe 2. Her hands, both of them, had the torn skin of someone who'd been fighting or crawling, or both. He pumped water into a basin, found a clean cloth, and set it on the table in front of her. "You can do it yourself if you'd rather," he said. "I won't push." She looked at the cloth, looked at the basin. Then she picked up the cloth and started cleaning her own face with the careful, deliberate movements of someone managing pain. Wyatt put the kettle on and leaned against the counter, giving her space. "You want to tell me who did this?" he asked. She didn't look up. "Not yet." "That's fine. You're not going to ask me why I was in your shed?" "I figure you'll tell me when you're ready." She glanced up at that, studied him again with those storm-gray eyes. "Most men would have already asked twice." "I ain't most men." A pause. She went back to cleaning the cut above her eye, and he watched her jaw tighten when the cloth touched the worst of it. "Crawford's men," she said quietly. Wyatt went still. He knew that name. Everybody in Red Rock Flats knew that name. Silas Crawford. Land speculator, loan collector, and the kind of man who wrapped his cruelty in paperwork and called it business. He had 3 or 4 men who rode for him. Hard-faced boys who did the things Crawford didn't want his hands to be seen doing. "What do they want with you?" Wyatt asked. He kept his voice even. "My father's land." Clara set the cloth down. "He died 6 weeks ago. Fever. and Crawford showed up at the house the day after we buried him, with a contract he claimed my father had signed. A debt agreement. Said the land was forfeit. She paused. It was a forgery. I've seen my father's signature 1,000 times. It wasn't his. You tell anyone? I told the sheriff. Her voice went flat on those words, dry and empty as the creek bed out back. He told me I ought to take what Crawford was offering and be grateful. Who's the sheriff in your town? Grady Holt. She said the name the way you'd say something you'd found dead on the road.
Wyatt had heard of Holt too. Knew enough. So Crawford's men came after you, he said. They came to remove me from the property. That's what they called it. She looked down at her hands. I didn't go quiet. I can see that. Something shifted in her face. Not quite a smile, but the ghost of one, there and gone in an instant. I ran. I've been running for 2 days. I don't have a horse anymore. They took her at the canyon crossing. I walked most of the last 15 miles in the heat. She looked up at him directly. I didn't know this was someone's land. I just needed somewhere dark and closed and— You don't owe me an explanation, Wyatt said. I owe you something. You didn't have to help me. Sure I did. He pushed off the counter and went to check the kettle. Man finds a woman half dead on his property, he helps her. That ain't extraordinary. That's just what you do. She was quiet for a moment. Not everyone would agree with you on that. Then they're wrong, he said simply. He made her eat. She resisted at first, not out of stubbornness, he thought, but out of the kind of exhaustion that makes a person forget they need things. He put a plate in front of her. Cold cornbread, dried beef, the last of a pot of beans he'd made that morning. She looked at it like she'd forgotten what food was. Then she ate every bit of it without a word. He sat across from her and drank his coffee, and didn't ask anything else. After a while, she said, You live here alone? Yep. How long? Going on 4 years. She absorbed that. Wife? He looked at his cup. Had one. She passed. I'm sorry. It was a while ago. Clara folded her hands around her own cup. He'd given her coffee too, and she'd taken it with both hands like it was something precious. Children? The word landed in the room and stayed there for a second. No, he said. She didn't push. He appreciated that. Outside, the wind had picked up. The cottonwood trees scraped against the side of the house, that dry rattling sound that had been the background of his summers for 4 years. He listened to it the way he always did, half out of habit, half out of something that never quite let him fully rest. Then he heard something else. He was on his feet before Clara could register the change in him. What? She started. Quiet. He moved to the window and looked out. The yard was dark, the last of the sunset long gone. The lamp threw a square of yellow light across the dirt outside. At the edge of that light, just at the border where the dark started, movement. A shape, there and gone. Then another, off to the left, circling wide around the back of the barn. His jaw tightened. How many men does Crawford usually send? He asked, not looking at her. Clara stood up so fast her chair scraped back. She crossed to the window and looked out beside him. He felt her go rigid. At least 3, she whispered. Usually 4. They track you here? I don't— Her voice caught. I tried to cover my trail. I walked in the creek for half a mile before I came up on your property. I don't know how. Doesn't matter how. He turned away from the window. His rifle was above the door. He took it down in one smooth motion and checked the load. What matters is they're here. Wyatt, he looked at her. She had her hands pressed flat against her thighs and her chin up, and she was scared, genuinely,
bone-deep scared. But she was holding it, not falling apart, not looking to him to fix everything. Just steady, waiting, watching him with those gray eyes. "I'm not leaving," she said, like she thought he might try to make her. "Didn't ask you to." He handed her the small pistol from his belt. "You know how to use one of these?" She took it without hesitation and checked the cylinder with practiced hands. He raised an eyebrow. "My father taught me," she said. "Good." He moved to the back door and checked the bar. Solid. Front door, the same. The one window on the east wall was low enough to be a problem. He pushed the heavy dresser a few inches to one side, giving himself a better angle without being silhouetted by the lamp. "Get down below the table level," he told her. "Not under it, just below the window line. If something comes through that glass, you duck and you shoot toward the door. You don't hesitate." "I understand." He believed her. He moved back to his position by the window and watched the yard. For a long moment, a long, stretched, airless moment, nothing happened. The cottonwood scraped. The windmill groaned. The lamp flickered in a draft from somewhere. Then a voice came out of the dark. Deep, unhurried. The voice of a man who had learned to sound calm, because calm was more frightening than shouting. "We know you're in there, Miss Bennett." A pause. "And we know you got somebody with you now. Rancher by the name of Callahan, I expect. Here's what I'd suggest, Mr. Callahan. This ain't your trouble. It wasn't your trouble before tonight, and it don't have to be your trouble going forward. You put the woman out, and we'll ride away quiet. Nobody has to know you were ever involved." Wyatt didn't answer. He heard Clara's breath beside him, slow, deliberate, controlled. She was doing the same thing he was doing, counting, measuring, figuring. "Mr. Callahan." The voice again, patient as stone. "You seem like a reasonable man. I'm Silas Crawford's head man. My name is Dale Pruitt. And I'm telling you straight, this is not a fight worth having. The woman's got a debt. Legal matter. Nothing more." "Legal matter," Wyatt said, loud enough to carry. "That what you call 2 days of running through a Texas summer? That what you call what I found under a canvas in my shed?" A beat of silence. "The woman is dramatic," Pruitt said, like it was obvious. Like it cost him something to have to explain this. "She fell. She's got bruises on her jaw that are 2 days old," Wyatt said. "And a cut over her eye, and torn up hands, and a twisted ankle. Now I don't know what kind of man you take me for, Pruitt, but I am not the kind that puts a woman out his door to the men who did that to her. So you can take your reasonable conversation and ride back to Crawford and tell him he's going to need a better offer." Another silence. Longer this time. Then, softer, only for her, Clara's voice, right beside him in the dark. "They won't leave," she said. "I know. There are at least 3 of them, maybe 4. "I know that too." "You don't have to do this," she said. Not pleading, just stating it, like she wanted him to walk into this fully aware, and not on her account alone. "I can, Clara." He said her name quiet and final. "I already did this. Minute I pulled that canvas back, I already did this. All we're doing now is seeing it through." She was quiet for a second. "All right," she said. Outside, Pruitt's voice came one more time, and the patience in it had thinned down to something with an edge. "Last chance, Callahan." Wyatt raised his rifle. "Come ahead, then," he said. And the night exploded. The first shot came through the east window, exactly where he'd expected. They'd been watching the house long enough to know which side the lamp was brightest. The glass burst inward, and Wyatt was already moving, already low, already tracking the muzzle flash. He fired twice. A shout from outside. One man down, or at least hit. "Door!" Clara shouted. He spun. The back door was taking impact. A boot, a shoulder, something heavy and repeated. The bar holding, but not for long. He crossed the room in 4 strides, planted himself to one side of the door, and waited. The bar split. The door came open, and a man came through it fast and low. And Wyatt hit him with the rifle stock across the side of the head before he could get his bearings. And the man went down hard on the kitchen floor and didn't get back up. Another shape in the doorway. This one had a knife. Wyatt dropped the rifle, no room for it, and took the man by the wrist, turning the blade aside, and they went into the kitchen wall together, and it was ugly and close and brutal, the way fights in small rooms always are. He got an elbow into the man's ribs, heard the grunt, felt the knife come free. He threw the man backward, and the man hit the edge of the table and went down. Silence. Wyatt straightened. His breath came hard. There was a pain in his side where something had connected. He didn't know when. He looked across the room. Clara stood by the front window. The small pistol was in her hand, smoke rising from the barrel. Her face was white as chalk. "There was a 4th one," she said. Her voice was steady. Her hands were not. "He was coming around the front. He's not coming anymore." Wyatt looked at her for a moment. "You all right?" he asked. She took a breath, let it out. "No," she said honestly. "But I'm standing." "That'll do." He went to the window and looked out. The yard was quiet. 2 shapes on the ground that he could see. Pruitt, wherever he was, wasn't making himself known. That bothered him. "We need to move," he said. "Move where?" "Away from here. By morning Crawford's going to know this didn't go the way Pruitt planned. He'll send more." He looked at her directly. "You got anyone? Anyone you trust? Town, family, anything?" She thought. "My father had a friend. Old man, runs a livery in a town called Harlow, about 20 miles north. Marshal Jed Harper. He was honest, one of the few." "Harper," Wyatt tested the name. "I've heard of him." "He'll help us if we can get to him." "Then that's where we're going." He moved to the back room to get what he needed. Ammunition, provisions, the small amount of cash he kept in the floorboard. He was back in under 2 minutes. Clara was on her feet by the door, her jaw set, the pistol still in her hand. She looked at him when he came back in. "You could still walk away from this," she said quietly. "Last chance. Crawford's reach is long. This isn't going to be simple or safe." Wyatt picked up his rifle, checked it. "Nothing worth doing ever is," he said. He opened the door and walked out into the dark summer night. And after only a moment's pause, she followed. The night was thick and close, the kind that pressed in from all sides and made the dark feel personal. Wyatt moved ahead of Clara through the yard, rifle in hand, eyes cutting left and right across every shape and shadow. The 2 men who'd come through the back door were still down. He didn't check to see how badly. The one Clara had stopped at the front window hadn't moved. Pruitt was nowhere. That was the problem. A man who shouts through the dark and then goes quiet doesn't go home. He goes somewhere you can't see him. "He's still out there," Clara said from behind him. Not a question. "Yep." "He'll follow us." "Probably." Wyatt kept moving toward the barn. "But he won't follow us close. He had 4 men tonight. He's down to 1. Himself. Even Pruitt's not stupid enough to trail 2 armed people through open country in the dark alone." "Crawford will send more." "He will, By morning, I expect. He pulled the barn door open and stepped inside, which is why we're not going to be here by morning. He saddled his own horse first, a big gray named Hatch, steady-tempered and road-wise, and then threw a saddle on the spare, a younger bay mare that wasn't as fast but would carry a rider without complaint. Clara stood near the door, watching the darkness outside, the small pistol still in her hand. "You ride well?" he asked. "Well enough." "Your ankle's going to make mounting hard." "I'll manage." He looked at her sideways. "I can give you a hand up. It ain't charity, it's just practical." She glanced at him. Something in the set of her jaw softened, just barely. "Fine." He brought the bay around and laced his hands together. She put her good foot in his palms and pushed up, and he felt the small catch of her breath when her injured ankle swung over. Controlled, deliberate, swallowed. She didn't make a sound. He mounted Hatch, and they moved out of the barn at a walk, keeping quiet, keeping slow until the yard was well behind them. Then he pushed Hatch to a trot, and Clara matched him stride for stride on the bay without being told. For the first mile, neither of them spoke. The plains stretched out in every direction, low and dark under a sky thick with stars. The summer heat had backed off some, down to something that was only uncomfortable rather than brutal. And the wind out of the north carried the dry smell of dust and distant grass fires. Wyatt kept them off the main trail and moved them along the ridgeline instead, where the terrain broke up their silhouette and gave them something to disappear into if they needed it.
"How well do you know this country?" Clara asked, pulling up alongside him.
Well enough. He'd ridden these ridges for 4 years alone, knew every dry wash and rock outcropping between his spread and Harlow. "We'll cut north, stay off the road. It'll take longer, but Crawford's men will be watching the road by first light." "How much longer?" "Hour, maybe more." She absorbed that. "And you trust this Harper?" "I don't know him personally," he said, "but I know his reputation. Man who stays honest in a county like this one, that takes either real backbone or real stupidity. And from what I've heard of Harper, it ain't stupidity." Clara was quiet for a moment. "My father trusted him. Said he was the only lawman in 3 counties who wasn't already in somebody's pocket." "Your father sounds like he was a good judge of men." "He was." Her voice went quiet on that, flat in the way that grief goes flat when you've been carrying it too long to let it sharp.
"He was the best man I ever knew, and they killed him as sure as if they'd put a bullet in him. The pressure, the threats, the constant legal harassment over the land. It wore him down. He got sick in March and he just—" She stopped. "He just didn't have any fight left." Wyatt didn't offer anything hollow. Didn't say, "I'm sorry," in that empty, reflexive way people did when they didn't know what else to give. He just let the silence sit there between them. A real silence, not an awkward one. And after a moment, Clara seemed to appreciate it for what it was. "Crawford's been after the Bennett land for 2 years," she continued. "It sits between his northern spread and the river. He needs it for the water rights. My father wouldn't sell, wouldn't sign anything. So Crawford started manufacturing debt, small claims at first, then bigger ones. Loans my father supposedly took out that he never took. Contracts he supposedly signed that he never touched." Her voice hardened. "And every time my father tried to fight it in court, something went wrong. Papers disappeared. Witnesses changed their stories. The judge in Red Rock, a man named Fowler, is Crawford's second cousin, twice removed, but still." "How much land we talking about?" 460 acres. River frontage on the east end. Crawford's offered twice the going rate, and my father still wouldn't take it." A pause. "I won't either." Wyatt glanced at her. In the dark, on horseback, with her chin up and her hands steady on the reins despite everything,
She looked like exactly the kind of woman who meant exactly what she said. "You've got the original deed?" "Hidden, back at the house, at what's left of it. I had to leave in a hurry." She said it without bitterness, just stating the facts. "I've got copies in my head, though. Every date, every signature. And I know where to find the man who witnessed my father's actual land registration. Old Horace Gill lives about 40 miles east."
Crawford doesn't know about him. He might. Maybe. But he's not the kind of man who talks easy. A beat. He's also got a shotgun and a legendary lack of patience for strangers. There was something almost dry in her voice on that last part, and Wyatt felt the corner of his mouth move. Then Hatch stopped dead. The gray did it without being asked. Just planted all 4 feet and threw his head up, ears pricked hard to the northeast. Wyatt had been riding this horse long enough to know that move. Hatch didn't spook easy. When he stopped like that, you listened. "Hold up," Wyatt said. Clara reined the bay in. They sat still, listening. For a moment, nothing. Then Wyatt heard it. Hoofbeats. Not behind them, where he'd been watching. Ahead. And not one horse. 3 at least. Moving fast on the lower trail, cutting north on what would have been their own path if they'd taken the road. "They didn't wait for morning," Clara breathed. "No." His jaw tightened. Crawford must have had men already riding when Pruitt sent word. He planned for this going wrong. "He planned for you," she said. Wyatt looked at her. "You're not unknown in this county, Wyatt. You had trouble with Crawford 2 years ago, the water rights dispute over the South Creek. He knows your land is 12 miles east of mine. He always knew I might end up running toward you. He was counting on it." The cold of that settled over him slow. So Pruitt showing up tonight was a distraction. Her voice had gone tight. Or a test. Either way, Crawford knew where I was before Pruitt ever knocked on your door. "Then Harper's Road is already being watched." "Probably." He was quiet for 10 seconds, working it out. "There's another way into Harlow," he said finally. "East approach, through the Needle Creek Passage. Longer, rougher, and most men who don't know this country wouldn't try it in the dark." "But you would?" "Done it before." He turned Hatch east. "Stay close. Don't let the bay fall behind. The footing gets bad in places, and she won't like it. But keep her steady, and she'll come through." Clara pulled up beside him. "How bad is bad?" "You'll know it when you feel it." She made a sound that was almost a laugh. Not quite. The situation didn't allow for actual laughter. But almost. They moved east. The Needle Creek Passage was exactly as unpleasant as the name implied. The terrain dropped into a shallow ravine, choked with dry brush and loose rock, and the horses picked through it with the careful, resentful energy of animals who knew better but were going anyway. Clara's bay shied twice on the steeper sections, but she kept her hands soft and her weight quiet, and talked the horse through it in a low, steady murmur that Wyatt found himself listening to. "You've got a good hand with horses," he said, when they'd cleared the worst of it and the ground leveled out again. "My father always said, a horse will tell you who a person really is." She patted the bay's neck. "This one's nervous, but she trusts. That's a good combination." "What does that say about the person?" She glanced at him. "Nervous but trusting? Or steady and stubborn?" "I was asking about the horse." "No, you weren't." He didn't argue. He wasn't sure she was wrong. They came up out of the ravine onto a long, flat stretch of open ground, and Harlow's lights were visible in the distance. A thin scatter of yellow windows against the black, still an hour away, but present, real, a destination. And that was when Clara said, very quietly, "Someone's following us." Wyatt didn't turn around.
How long? He asked. Since the ravine, I think. Single rider. Staying back. Staying just far enough that I almost talked myself out of it. Almost. I'm sure now. He kept the pace steady, didn't speed up. Speeding up would tell the rider behind them that they'd been made, and that could turn a following into a pursuit. Pruitt, he said. Has to be. He had a horse somewhere we didn't find. He let the others go ahead on the road to box us in and kept himself back. Smart man. Dangerous man, she corrected. Those are usually the same thing. He thought for a moment. We can't bring him into Harlow behind us.
If Harper's office is being watched, riding in with Pruitt on our tail is the same as handing them both a reason to make a scene in a public street. Crawford's lawyers would have a field day. So what do we do? We changed the math. He looked out at the flat ground ahead of them. There was a small rock formation off to the left. Nothing dramatic, just a cluster of boulders at the edge of a dry wash. The kind of natural cover that the land out here offered every quarter mile, if you knew to look. You keep riding. Slow pace. Don't look back. Take both horses into that rock formation on the left, and wait. And you? I'm going to have a conversation with Pruitt. Wyatt, it ain't a killing conversation, he said. The man hasn't shot at us since the cabin. He's following, not attacking. That means Crawford told him not to. Told him to track us and report back. Which means Crawford wants to know who we're going to and what we're planning before he makes his next move. He glanced at her. That's useful information for us, if I can get Pruitt talking. Or he puts a bullet in you the second you separate from me. Possibly. He said it matter-of-factly. But I don't think so. Pruitt's a professional. Professionals don't make moves that give them complications they weren't asked to make. You're gambling. I'm calculating. He met her eyes. There's a difference. She stared at him for a second. Then she reached out and took the reins of his horse alongside her own, ready to lead both when he dismounted. Don't die, she said, like it was an instruction. Yes, ma'am, he said, and swung down off hatch in one quiet motion, moving immediately into the dark beside the trail. He heard Pruitt's horse before he saw it. A careful, controlled walk, the footfall of a rider trying to be quiet without quite achieving it. Wyatt positioned himself at the edge of the trail behind a low rise and waited, absolutely still, while the shape of horse and rider materialized out of the dark ahead. Pruitt was good. Wyatt would give him that. The man rode without a lantern, hat pulled low, and he'd been staying back far enough that most men would never have spotted him. But Clara Bennett had spotted him, and that said something about her that Wyatt filed away for later. He waited until the rider was 5 feet past him. Then he said, "Pruitt." The horse shied. Pruitt controlled it fast, one hand on the reins, the other going to his hip. But he didn't draw, and that told Wyatt what he needed to know. A man who draws without looking is a man who shoots first. Pruitt looked. In the dark, Pruitt found Wyatt's outline and the rifle aimed at the center of his chest. "Step down," Wyatt said. "Slow." A long pause. Then Pruitt stepped down from the horse. He was a lean man, 50s, with a face that had spent too many years in the sun, and a way of holding himself that communicated a kind of permanent, practiced calm. "You're smarter than I gave you credit for," Pruitt said. "I put your hands where I can see them." Pruitt raised both hands slowly. Easy. A man performing cooperation with the air of someone who'd been through this before and was not particularly impressed. "What now?" Pruitt said. "Now you talk." "About?" "Crawford's plan. The full one." Wyatt kept the rifle steady. "Not the version you sold through the window back at my house. The real one. What happens to her if he gets her back? What happens to the land? And what Crawford's got on Grady Holt and Judge Fowler
that keeps them both so cooperative? Pruitt studied him. That's a lot of questions for a man standing in the dark. I've got all night. A pause.
Pruitt's hand stayed up. His face didn't change much, but something moved behind his eyes. A calculation running, and Wyatt watched it happen.
Crawford doesn't just want the land, Pruitt said finally. Wyatt waited. He wants the water rights, yes. But the Bennett parcel also sits above something Crawford found out about 6 months ago. He paused. Railroad survey. New line coming through, 20 miles east of Red Rock Flats. The company's been buying up land rights quiet. Doesn't want the prices to jump before they've secured everything they need. Crawford got tipped off by someone inside the surveying company. That land doubles in value the minute the route gets announced. Maybe triples. Wyatt was quiet for a second. So this isn't about water rights at all. Water rights are the story he tells. The railroad's the reason. Pruitt kept his voice level, almost detached. The tone of a man reporting facts he'd long since stopped having feelings about. The Bennett girl can't prove the deed forgery in Fowler's court. Fowler will bury it. And Crawford knows it. He just needs her off the property long enough for the transfer to get recorded. And Holt? He's in on it? Holt does what he's paid to do. A flat pause. Same as most men. Not all men, Wyatt said. Pruitt looked at him steadily. No, not all men. He said it without mockery, and that, somehow, was the strangest part of the whole conversation. What's Crawford going to do when you don't come back with a report tonight? Wyatt asked. He'll assume the worst and accelerate. He's got a judge in another county who can push the transfer through emergency proceedings, claim abandonment of the property. If he files by end of the week, it'll be done before Harper or anyone else can build a case to stop it. How long do we have? Pruitt met his eyes. 4 days. Maybe 5 if Crawford wants to be careful. But Crawford doesn't like being careful when he's close to something he wants. A beat. He's not a patient man. 4 days. Wyatt lowered the rifle. Pruitt blinked. It was the first time the man had looked genuinely surprised. You're letting me go? Pruitt said. I'm making a choice. Wyatt kept his voice level. You came to my house tonight with men who broke my door and put a knife at my ribs, and frightened a woman who's been through enough. I don't owe you easy. But I'm not a man who puts a bullet in somebody who's not drawing on him. He stepped back. You go back to Crawford. You tell him what you want. But I want you to know something, Pruitt, man to man. What's that? That land belongs to Clara Bennett. Her father built it. He died defending it. And I am going to make absolutely sure that Crawford doesn't take it. He kept his eyes on Pruitt's. Whatever it takes. You understand me? Pruitt stood very still for a moment. Then he picked up his horse's reins. You're going to need more than Harper, he said quietly. I know. There are people in Red Rock who know what Crawford's doing. Merchants, ranchers, they're scared. But they're scared of a man they think is untouchable. You give them a reason to believe he ain't untouchable. He stopped himself, like he'd said more than he meant to. Wyatt studied him. Why are you telling me this? Wyatt asked. Pruitt put his foot in the stirrup and swung up. He looked down at Wyatt from the saddle. I've worked for Crawford 11 years, he said, and something in his voice went old and worn. There are things I've done in those 11 years that I am not going to be able to explain to anybody who matters. He gathered his reins. But I'm 53 years old, Callahan, and I am very, very tired. He rode away south, slow and quiet, back the way he'd come. Wyatt stood in the dark and watched him go. Then he turned and walked back toward the rock formation where Clara was waiting, And when she came out from behind the boulders leading both horses, she looked at him with those gray eyes and said, "He talked?" "He talked." "And?" He took Hatch's reins. "We've got 4 days to stop a land transfer that Crawford's already half arranged. And we've got a dead man's unsigned deed, a hidden witness, and a marshal in Harlow who may or may not have enough legal reach to do anything about a county judge who's been bought." Clara looked at him for a long, quiet moment. "So the same odds we had an hour ago," she said. "Worse, actually. But," he paused, "there's something else. Crawford's using this land because of a railroad survey. If we can get that information to the right people, the surveying company, a federal land office, anyone outside of Crawford's pocket, it changes the whole shape of things. He can't control a federal inquiry." Something shifted in her face. Not hope exactly. Something more cautious than hope, but moving in the same direction. "Jed Harper has connections in the federal land office," she said slowly. "My father mentioned it once. Something about a case years ago." "Then that's where we start." He mounted up. She mounted beside him, the bay settling into a steady walk. Harlow's lights were closer now, close enough to pick out individual windows. "Pruitt," she said after a moment, "do you trust him?" Wyatt thought about the way the man's voice had gone when he said, "very, very tired." The way it hadn't sounded like a performance. "No," he said honestly. "But I think he told me the truth tonight. And sometimes that's enough." She considered that. 4 days, she said quietly. 4 days. They rode toward the lights of Harlow together, and the summer dark pressed close around them on every side. And somewhere behind them, Wyatt knew, the clock had already started running. Harlow, at 2 a.m, was the kind of quiet that had teeth in it. Not peaceful quiet, the other kind. The kind that settles over a town when people have learned that the less they know about what moves through the streets at night, the better off they sleep. A few windows still burned yellow. A dog barked twice from somewhere behind the feed store, and then went silent, like it had thought better of drawing attention to itself. Wyatt and Clara came in off the east approach, tied the horses at the rail behind the livery, and moved on foot toward the marshal's office on the far end of the main street. Clara was limping harder than she had been 2 hours ago. The ankle had stiffened up on the ride. But she matched his pace without complaint, and didn't reach for him until her boot caught a rut in the road, and she stumbled. And then she accepted his steadying hand with the same deliberate, almost businesslike manner she'd accepted everything else from him. "Almost there," he said. "I know." She wasn't asking for reassurance, just acknowledging. The marshal's office had a light in it, dim, set far back, the kind of light a man left burning when he wasn't sleeping well. Wyatt knocked twice, firm, and waited. Silence. Then footsteps, heavy, unhurried. The sound of a man who'd learned long ago not to rush to his own door in the middle of the night. "Who is it?" The voice from inside was deep and carrying, the voice of a man who'd spent decades projecting authority across noisy rooms. "Name's Wyatt Callahan. I've got Clara Bennett with me. She needs help." A long pause. Then the bolt slid back. Jed Harper was 60, or close enough to it that the difference didn't matter. He was built like a man who had once been very large and had shrunk some with age, but still carried the frame, wide through the shoulders, thick in the hands, with a white stubbled jaw and pale blue eyes that were fully alert despite the hour. He wore his pants and shirt, no boots, and his badge was pinned to his shirt, like he'd put it on before he came to the door. He looked at Clara first. Something moved through his face. Recognition, then sharp concern, then a kind of grief-adjacent worry that settled in behind his eyes and stayed there. "Thomas's girl," he said. "Yes, sir," Clara said. God almighty. He stepped back and held the door open, Get in here, both of you, right now.
He sat them down, got water, looked Clara over with the practical, unsentimental assessment of a man who'd seen injury before and needed facts, not comfort. "Crawford's men?" he said.
Yes.
"How many came at you?"
4. At Wyatt's ranch. We handled it."
She paused.
Pruitt was among them.
Harper's jaw tightened on that. Pruitt himself. He looked at Wyatt. "You had 4 of Crawford's men come at you on your own property, and you're sitting in my office at 2 in the morning instead of in a pine box? I'd like to know how."
Clara shot one of them,
Wyatt said.
Harper glanced at her. Something shifted in his expression. Respect, reluctant and real. "There's more," Wyatt said. "Pruitt followed us after. We had a conversation." He laid it out clean and fast. The railroad survey, the emergency transfer proceedings, the 4-day window, the mention of contacts inside the federal land office. He watched Harper's face as he talked, and he saw the man's expression move through several distinct stages. Surprise. Then anger. Then something harder and more focused than either. When Wyatt finished, Harper was quiet for 10 full seconds. "Railroad survey," Harper said. He said it slowly, like he was tasting it. "That's why Crawford's been pushing so hard this year. I couldn't figure the timing. His patience ran out, and I couldn't account for it." He leaned back in his chair. "That accounts for it." "You believe Pruitt?" Clara asked. "I believe Pruitt's tired," Harper said. "I've known Dale Pruitt since he was young and not yet ruined. What he told your friend here is consistent with everything I've been unable to prove for 3 years." He looked at Wyatt directly. "You understand what you're up against? Fowler's in Crawford's pocket. County court is useless. Grady Holt will arrest you both if Crawford tells him to, and find a reason later. I've got jurisdiction in Harlow, and about 12 miles in any direction, and that's the edge of my reach." "Pruitt mentioned a federal land office," Wyatt said. "Said you had connections there." Harper paused. Not the pause of a man who didn't know what was being referred to. The pause of a man deciding how much to say. "I know a man," Harper said carefully. "Federal land examiner, based in Austin. Name of Arthur Reeves. We worked a case together 8 years ago. Fraudulent homestead claims. Different county. Same kind of legal maneuvering Crawford uses." He picked up his coffee cup, found it empty, set it back down. "But Reeves can't move without documentation. I can't send him a letter that says Crawford's doing something crooked and expect him to ride out here on my word alone. I need paper. I need the original deed, witnesses, and the railroad survey information. Ideally, something that shows Crawford knew about the route in advance and timed the forgery around it." "The original deed is back at the Bennett property," Clara said. "And the property's been occupied by Crawford's men since yesterday morning, if I had to guess," Harper said. He looked at her steadily. "Am I wrong?" She didn't answer, which was an answer. "The witness," Wyatt said. "Horace Gill. Clara says he was present at the original land registration." "Gill," Harper nodded slowly. "He'd hold up. Man's got no reason to lie, and a long memory. But he's 40 miles east, and we've got 4 days." He rubbed the side of his jaw. "The survey information is the piece that changes everything. If we can show Crawford had inside knowledge—" "Someone tipped him from inside the surveying company," Wyatt said. "Pruitt told me that much." "Who?" "He didn't say, or didn't know." Harper stood up and went to the window. Stood with his back to them, looking out at the dark street. "There's a man in town," he said without turning around. "Came through 6 weeks ago. Said he was a cattle buyer. Stayed longer than a cattle buyer would. I've been watching him." A pause. "He's been meeting regularly with Crawford's foreman at the saloon. Quiet meetings, end of the bar, the kind of meetings where both men face the room. Wyatt went still. Survey man. That's my read. Harper turned back. I don't have enough to move on him yet. But if he's the connection between Crawford and the railroad company, and if he kept records of what he passed and when, then we have the proof of premeditation, Clara said. She was sitting forward now, her hands flat on the table, her voice stripped of everything but precision. The forgery on the deed was dated February. If Crawford knew about the railroad route before February, it establishes intent and motive that no county judge, not even Fowler, can explain away to a federal examiner. Harper looked at her. You're your father's daughter, he said quietly. Something moved in her face, and she pressed her lips together and looked at the table for a moment and then back up. Where does this survey man stay? She asked. Millard's boarding house, East End. Harper checked the clock on his wall. It's near 3 a.m. He won't be moving until dawn. He sat back down. You two need sleep. I've got a back room, nothing fancy, but it's safe and nobody knows you're here. In the morning, we move. We go at this from 3 directions at once. Gill for the deed testimony, the survey man for the premeditation evidence, and I'll start drafting the letter to Reeves in Austin. 3 days left, Wyatt said. 3 days left, Harper confirmed. He looked between them, at Clara's bruised face and steady eyes, at Wyatt's torn shirt and the dried blood on his left forearm from something that had happened in the cabin fight that he hadn't bothered to mention. You two sleep, he said. I'll keep watch. Nobody comes in or out of this building without going through me first, and I've been told I am very disagreeable to go through. Clara slept for 4 hours. Wyatt did not sleep at all. He sat in the front room of Harper's office with the rifle across his knees and the lamp turned low, and he thought about railroads and forged signatures and a woman with storm-gray eyes who had been carrying an entire war on her shoulders before she'd ended up on his property, half dead, under a canvas cloth. He thought about the 4 days. He thought about what Pruitt had said. There are people in Red Rock who know what Crawford's doing. Give them a reason to believe he ain't untouchable. And he turned that over and over in his mind, the way you turn a pebble in your hand, feeling the edges. He was still turning it when Clara appeared in the doorway of the back room at 6:15, dressed and alert, her dark hair pulled back, moving with less of a limp than she'd had the night before. You didn't sleep, she said. I'm fine. That's not what I said. She came and sat in the chair across from him. She looked at his arm, the cut, dried now and probably needing stitches it wasn't going to get, and she reached into her pocket and produced a strip of clean cloth that she must have found in Harper's back room. Give me your arm, she said. He considered arguing, decided it wasn't worth it. She wrapped the cut with quick, competent hands. He watched her face while she did it, the concentration in it, the small line between her brows, the way she tied the knot snug without being told how tight he could stand it. You do that like someone who's done it before, he said. My father was an accident-prone man. She smoothed the end of the cloth down. I spent a lot of years following him around with a bandage. She sat back, and for just a moment her face opened up. Not in grief exactly, but in something that sat right next to it. He would have liked you. How do you figure? He liked quiet men who did things. She said it simply. He always said the loudest men in a room were the ones who hadn't done anything worth talking about yet. Wyatt was quiet for a second. Your father sounds like a man I'd have wanted to know, he said. She met his eyes, and the look between them lasted a beat longer than necessary. And then the front door opened, and Harper came in from outside, with the energy of a man who had been up for hours and had used them well. We've got a problem, he said, and dropped a folded paper on the table between them.
Wyatt unfolded it. It was a legal notice, printed and stamped, the kind of document that came out of a county clerk's office. His eyes went straight to the date and the body of the text, and his stomach went cold. Emergency petition for property transfer, he read aloud. Submitted to the Honorable Judge Clarence Fowler, County of Red Rock, on the basis of debt default and property abandonment. He looked up at Harper. Crawford filed this yesterday morning. The day after Clara ran, Harper said. He wasn't sitting down. He had the look of a man working out a problem in real time. He didn't wait to see how Pruitt's run turned out. He filed the same day. He's been ready for months. The hearing's in 3 days, Clara said. She'd taken the paper from Wyatt and was reading it with the focused, cold expression of someone who'd been hit but hadn't decided whether to fall yet. He's asking for summary judgment. No full trial. Just Fowler rubber stamping it.
Which Fowler will absolutely do, Harper said flatly. I know Clarence Fowler. The man has the spine of a wet newspaper. 3 days, Wyatt said, not 4. Pruitt counted to soften the news, Harper said, or he genuinely didn't know the filing had already happened. Either way, it doesn't matter. 3 days. The room was quiet for a moment. Clara set the paper down on the table with a careful, deliberate motion. The way a person sets something down when they are working very hard not to break anything. Then she said, "What time does the boarding house serve breakfast?" Both men looked at her. "The survey man," she said. "What time does he eat?" Harper blinked. 7. Most mornings he's in the dining room by 7. Then I need to be there at 5 minutes past. She looked at Wyatt. I'm going to talk to him. Clara, not as myself. He doesn't know what I look like. She was already working it through. He could see it in her face, sharp and quick and practical. He knows Clara Bennett exists as a legal problem in Crawford's world. He doesn't know my face. I walk into that dining room as a woman eating breakfast. I sit near him, and I listen. She paused. Or I ask him one question and see how he reacts. That is an extraordinarily dangerous idea, Wyatt said. I know. If he recognizes you or figures out what you're doing, he'll send word to Crawford before we're out of the building. I know that too. She looked at him steadily. But we need that survey connection documented, and we have 3 days, and there is not a man in this room who can walk into that boarding house and do what I can do. Because a woman eating breakfast is furniture. Nobody looks at her twice. Wyatt looked at Harper. Harper looked at Wyatt. She's not wrong, Harper said reluctantly. She's right, Wyatt said. And I still don't like it. You don't have to like it, Clara said. You just have to cover the exit. She walked into Millard's boarding house at 7:04 with a borrowed shawl over her shoulders and her bruised face tilted down at the precise angle that said, "Tired traveler, just passing through, nothing to see." Wyatt was outside. Back door. Harper had the front. The dining room had 6 tables. The survey man, Harper had identified him as a man named Gilbert Ward, mid-40s, thinning hair, the kind of face that was easy to forget, was already at his usual table in the corner, with a plate of eggs and a newspaper he wasn't reading. Clara took the table next to his. She ordered coffee. She sat with her hands around the cup and her eyes forward, and she listened. Ward wasn't meeting anyone this morning. He was alone, which was either good or bad, depending on what he was thinking about. He ate without much attention, turned the newspaper pages without reading them, and twice he looked at his watch. A man waiting for something. Clara turned her cup in her hands and kept her breathing even, and thought about what Wyatt had said. I'm calculating. There's a difference. And she calculated. Ward looked at his watch a third time. She said, without looking at him, "You expecting someone?" He glanced up, looked at her the way Harper had predicted, barely seeing her. "Just checking the time," he said, already looking back down. Long way from Austin, she said pleasantly. He went still. Not a big stillness, a careful one. The kind that happens when someone says something that lands in an unexpected place. He looked at her fully then. She kept her face mild and open and completely unreadable, and met his eyes with the patience of a woman who had been managing dangerous men for 2 days and had run out of fear somewhere on a dark trail east of Harlow. "Do I know you?" Ward said. "No," she said truthfully. "But I know some people in Austin. Land office people. They talk." She lifted her coffee. It's surprising, the things that travel. Ward's hand had gone flat on the table. "Who are you?" "Nobody important." She stood up and left 2 coins beside her cup. She buttoned the borrowed shawl and looked at him one last time. "The land survey for the eastern Red Rock route is going to be public information inside of a week," she said quietly. "Federal examiner named Reeves is interested in how certain private parties came to know about it ahead of schedule." She let that sit for exactly 2 seconds. "Have a good morning." She walked out the front door. Harper fell into step beside her the moment she cleared the porch. "Well?" "He knows something," she said. "And now he knows we know it, which means he's going to move." "Move how?" "Either he runs, which means he's guilty and knows the evidence trail leads back to him, or he goes to Crawford right now, which means Crawford finds out we're in Harlow and have federal contacts." "Or both," Harper said grimly. "Or both." She kept walking. "Either way, he's going to make a mistake in the next hour. Scared men always do." She glanced at the marshal. "You have someone who can watch him?" "Deputy. Good kid." Harper was already looking back over his shoulder toward the boarding house. "I'll have him on ward inside 5 minutes." Wyatt was waiting at the corner of the building. He looked at Clara when she came around the side, looked her over, quick and thorough in the way he'd been doing since the shed. Checking, assessing. The involuntary audit of a man who decided she was his responsibility, whether she'd asked for that or not. "You're in one piece," he said. "Told you I would be." "You told me no such thing." "I thought it very loudly." She stopped beside him and lowered her voice. "Ward's scared. He'll run or he'll call for Crawford. Either direction helps us." She met his eyes. "We've moved this forward." He looked at her for a moment. Then he nodded. "Harper's writing to Reeves?" he asked. "Writing this morning." She turned to walk back toward the marshal's office. "We need to talk about the deed. Even with Ward's testimony or flight, we need the original documentation, which is on a property guarded by Crawford's men." "Yes." "So we're going back." She stopped, turned. "We're going back," she confirmed. And there was something in the way she said it, steady and deliberate, and with full knowledge of what it meant, that reminded him of the way she'd looked at him in that burning, broken cabin, with the pistol in her hand and her chin up and her eyes saying, "I know exactly where I am, and I'm still here." He'd made his choice the minute he lifted that canvas cloth. He was making it again now. "All right," he said. Then Harper came fast around the corner of the building, and both of them turned, and one look at his face told them everything before he said a word. "Ward," Harper said, breathing hard. "He didn't run, and he didn't go to Crawford." "Then what did he do?" Wyatt asked. "He went to the telegraph office." Harper's jaw was tight. "Already sent 2 wires before my deputy could get there. One to Crawford's lawyer in Red Rock. One to a name we don't recognize in Austin." Clara and Wyatt looked at each other. "Crawford knows we're here," Wyatt said. "And whoever Ward's protecting in Austin knows we're looking," Clara said. "How long before Crawford moves?" Wyatt asked Harper. Harper checked the sky the way men did when they were calculating distance and time and the speed of bad news. "He's a hard ride from Harlow. If he leaves on word of the telegraph—" He paused. 6 hours. Maybe less if he pushes. 6 hours. Then we don't have 3 days anymore, Clara said. No, Harper said. We have 6 hours. The morning sun was barely clear of the horizon, and somewhere out on the Red Rock Road, Wyatt could already feel the clock burning. 6 hours. Wyatt said the number in his head twice and let it settle like a stone into still water. 6 hours before Crawford hit Harlow with enough men and enough legal paperwork to make every move they'd made in the last 12 hours irrelevant. 6 hours to get to the Bennett property, pull the original deed, ride 40 miles east to Horace Gill, and get back with something solid enough for Harper to put in a letter to Arthur Reeves in Austin. It wasn't enough time. He knew that before he finished the thought. We split it, he said. Harper looked at him. Say that again? We can't do all 3 in 6 hours, not riding together. He looked between Harper and Clara. You stay here, keep Ward from running or talking any further, and start that letter to Reeves whether you have the documentation yet or not. Tell him what you know, what you suspect, and that more is coming. Get it moving, now. And you? Harper said. I ride for the Bennett property. Crawford's men are sitting on that property, Harper said flatly. I know. There could be 4 or 5 of them by now. I know that too. Clara had been very quiet for the last 30 seconds. He could feel her working through the same math he was, coming at it from a different direction, and he knew before she opened her mouth what she was going to say. I'm coming with you, she said. No. It's my property, Wyatt. I know where the deed is hidden. You'd tear that house apart for an hour and not find it. He looked at her ankle, which she'd been favoring all morning, and the bruising on her jaw that had gone a darker color overnight, and the cut above her eye that still needed proper closing. Where is it? He asked. Hidden, she said. And I'm not telling you in advance because if you go alone and something goes wrong, I need that information to still be viable. That is an infuriating answer. It's also a correct one. She held his gaze. I can ride. My ankle is sore, not broken. We go together, we get in and out fast, and we ride for Gill before Crawford's men can regroup. She paused. You know I'm right. He looked at Harper. Harper raised both hands. Don't look at me. I stopped arguing with women who've been right 3 times in a row. Wyatt put his hat on. We ride in 20 minutes, he said. Get what you need. They left Harlow at a hard gallop, cutting southwest on the back trails, pushing the horses faster than the terrain strictly allowed, and trusting the animals to find their own footing. Clara rode with her jaw set and her eyes forward, and she didn't mention the ankle once, and Wyatt didn't ask. 40 minutes out of Harlow, she said, There are 2 ways in. Front and back, he said. There's a third. The old irrigation ditch on the north side runs alongside the barn. It's steep enough to move through without being seen from the house if you stay low. She glanced at him. My father dug it 20 years ago. Crawford's men won't know it's there unless they've been through the property survey, and those surveys don't show terrain features that old. You've been thinking about this the whole ride. I've been thinking about this since I left, she said. Every step I took away from that property, I was already thinking about how to get back in. How many men do you think Crawford left there? 2, maybe 3. Enough to hold the property and make it look occupied. Not enough to be a fighting force. He moved his fighters toward Harlow when Ward sent the wire. She paused. Which means the men at the house right now are watchers, not soldiers. Still armed. Still armed, she agreed. But Crawford wouldn't put his best men on an empty house. He'd keep them close to himself. Wyatt thought about that. She was probably right. Crawford was the kind of man who kept his assets where he could see them. That was the whole psychology of what he'd been doing for years, pulling everything toward himself, controlling every variable. He wouldn't waste Pruitt-level talent watching an abandoned homestead. "We go in through the ditch," Wyatt said. "I go first. You stay behind me until I've cleared the barn." "Agreed." "And if it goes loud, then we get the deed and we run, and we don't stop for anything," she said. "Good."
The Bennett property was quiet when they came up on it from the north, dismounting a quarter-mile out and walking the horses through dry brush until they found the irrigation ditch exactly where Clara had described it. It was narrow, maybe 4 feet deep, the summer-cracked earth at the bottom hard under their boots. Wyatt went first. Clara followed, one hand on his shoulder to manage the uneven footing without putting full weight on the ankle. They moved slowly, carefully, every footfall placed. 20 yards from the barn, Wyatt stopped and held up his hand and listened. Voices, 2 of them, from the direction of the house, maybe 60 yards away, unhurried, the tone of men having an unimportant conversation. He couldn't make out words. He held still for another 30 seconds, mapping the sound, figuring the angle. He turned back to Clara and held up 2 fingers. She nodded. They came up out of the ditch on the barn's blind side and pressed against the wall. Wyatt eased around the corner and checked. The barn door was closed, no horses visible at the rail outside. He pushed the door open an inch at a time, and they slipped inside. Dark. Hay smell. 1 horse in the far stall. Crawford's man's mount, a thick-necked roan that turned to look at them without alarm. "Where's the deed?" Wyatt breathed. Clara was already moving. She went to the back wall of the barn, to a wooden shelf that held rusted tools and old tack and the accumulated forgotten clutter of a working property. She felt along the underside of the second shelf board with practiced hands, found something, pressed it. A section of the board gave way. Inside, a flat tin box, the kind used for storing important papers, sealed with a small clasp. She took it out and held it against her chest for a second, with her eyes closed. Just 1 second, like she was holding something she'd been afraid she'd never touch again. Then she opened her eyes and tucked it inside her coat. Wyatt exhaled. They turned for the door, and the barn door opened from outside. A man stood in the frame, young, broad, with a rifle he was already raising. He had the startled expression of someone who'd come to check the horse and gotten something very different. "Hey," he started. Wyatt moved before the word was finished. He crossed the distance in 3 long strides, got inside the rifle's arc before the man could bring it to bear, and drove his elbow into the man's jaw with everything he had. The man went down sideways into the stall fence and slid, and the rifle clattered, and Wyatt caught it before it could hit the ground and make any more noise than it already had. He looked at the door, looked outside. The voices from the house had stopped. "They heard something," Clara said. "Maybe." He kept his eyes on the house. 1 second. 2. 3. The voices started again. He let out a slow breath. Or maybe not. He looked at the man on the ground, out but breathing. Time to move. Now. They came out of the barn at a fast walk, not running, not yet, because running on open ground was movement, and movement caught the eye, and made for the horses with the careful urgency of people who knew exactly how thin the margin was. 40 feet. 30. "Hey!" The shout came from the house. A second man, standing on the porch, looking their direction. "Hey, stop right there!" They ran. The horses were where they'd left them, and Wyatt was up on hatch before the echo of the shout had died, and Clara was up on the bay a half-second behind him. And they went east at full gallop, with the sound of a rifle shot cracking behind them, and the dirt kicking up 10 feet to their left. "Ride!" Wyatt shouted, which was unnecessary, because Clara was already low over the bay's neck, moving with the horse like she'd been born to it, her hair whipping loose, the tin box pressed against her chest with one arm, while the other hand handled the reins. They didn't slow down for 2 miles. When the horses finally dropped to a labored canter,
and then a trot. Wyatt looked back. Nothing following. Not yet. The man on the porch might not have a fast enough horse, or he was smart enough to know he couldn't catch two riders who had a head start and a reason. "You all right?" he asked. Clara straightened up in the saddle. She was breathing hard, and her face was flushed, and there was something in her eyes that was almost relief. "I have it," she said. Her hand pressed against her coat where the tin box sat. "I actually have it." "We have it," he said. She looked at him. Her expression did something complicated, and then settled into something simpler and truer. "We have it," she said. Horace Gill lived exactly where Clara had described, 40 miles east, down a rutted track that dead-ended at a small property that announced its owner's temperament before you ever knocked. A hand-painted sign on the fence post read, "Trespassers will be educated." And below it, in smaller letters, "I ain't jokin'." The door opened before they reached it. Horace Gill was 70 if he was a day, lean as a fence rail, with a shotgun in his hands, and a squinting expression that suggested he found most things the world sent his way personally offensive. He looked at Clara. The squint changed. "Thomas's daughter," he said, not a question. "I heard your daddy passed. I'm sorry for it. He was a good man." "He was," Clara said. "Mr. Gill, I need your help." "I know why you're here." He lowered the shotgun. Not all the way, but enough to be civil. He looked at Wyatt. "Who's this?" "Wyatt Callahan," Clara said. "He's with me." "He armed?" "Yes, sir," Wyatt said. "Good." Gill pushed the door open. "Then get in here before somebody sees you standing on my front step." He listened, without interrupting, which Wyatt appreciated. Sat in a straight-back chair with his hands on his knees and his eyes on Clara, while she laid out everything. The forgery, the railroad survey, the 4-day window that was now down to hours, the emergency petition before Fowler, the letter Harper was writing to Reeves. When she finished, Gill was quiet for a moment. "The forged signature," he said. "You're sure?" "I know my father's hand." "So do I." He looked at the tin box on the table. "May I?" Clara opened it and slid the deed across. Gill looked at it for a long time. His face didn't move much, but something went through his eyes, old and slow and final, like a door closing on something that mattered. "That is not Thomas Bennett's signature," he said. "No," Clara said. "I was there when he signed the original," Gill said. 22 years ago, spring. I witnessed it myself, and I have the witness copy in my possession." He stood up with the deliberate care of a man whose joints made negotiations with him in the morning. He went to his desk, opened a drawer, and produced a folded document that had aged to the color of good leather. He laid it beside the deed from the tin box. The signatures were not even close. "I'll testify to this," Gill said, "in any court that isn't Fowler's." "We're hoping to make it a federal matter," Wyatt said. "There's an examiner in Austin named Reeves." "Arthur Reeves?" Gill looked up sharply. "I know that name." "You do?" Clara said. "He came through this county 3 years ago looking into land irregularities. Fowler managed to slow-walk the whole inquiry until Reeves ran out of time and had to move on to another case." Gill set both documents down with precision. "But if he's looking at this county again, with documentation, and with the railroad fraud angle," he paused, "that man will not let it go a second time. That is not a man who accepts being made to look slow twice." "Then we need to get him everything today," Wyatt said. "Harper's already writing," Clara said, "but we need to get these documents to him to include with the letter." "How?" Gill asked. "Telegraph," Wyatt said. "Not the full documents. We can't wire paper. But enough detail that Reeves knows what's coming. Dates, signatures, witness confirmation, the survey connection. Enough that when Harper's letter arrives, Reeves is already moving. Gil looked at the documents, then at Clara, then at Wyatt. The nearest telegraph that isn't in Crawford's backyard is in Millhaven, he said, 14 miles north. Then that's our next stop, Wyatt said. Gil straightened. I'm coming with you. Mr. Gil, son, I am 71 years old, and I have been watching Silas Crawford eat this county alive for a decade, while honest men looked the other way because they were afraid. He picked up his shotgun with the authority of a man who'd made a decision and wasn't entertaining appeals. I am not afraid. I am furious. And fury, in my experience, is considerably more useful. Wyatt looked at him. Can you ride? He asked. Can I ride? Gil said it like an insult. They hit the outskirts of Harlow before Millhaven, because Clara said they needed to give Harper the documents directly, and Wyatt didn't argue. It added 40 minutes to the ride, and each of those minutes sat on him like weight. Harper met them at the door. His face told Wyatt the news before he said it. Crawford's already here, Harper said. The words landed in Wyatt's chest like a cold hand. Where? He said. Saloon. Him and 5 men, plus his lawyer, a man named Adderley. Harper held the door open, and they moved inside fast. He rode in an hour ago. He's not hiding. Walked straight in, bought drinks, made himself visible. He knows we're in town. A pause. He also knows about Reeves. How? Clara said. Ward. Harper's voice went flat on the name. My deputy had him, but Ward slipped out during the night shift change. I don't know exactly what he told Crawford's lawyer, but Adderley was seen at the telegraph office an hour ago, sending his own wire to Austin. Trying to get ahead of us with Reeves, Wyatt said. Trying to poison the well. Tell Reeves that any inquiry is based on forged counter-documentation from a woman contesting a legal debt. Harper looked at Clara. Standard move. Cast doubt before the evidence arrives. Then we have to get to Reeves first. Clara had the tin box out already, moving to Harper's desk. What's in your letter so far? Everything Pruitt told Wyatt. The survey timeline, Ward's presence in the meetings with Crawford's foreman, my assessment of Fowler's conflict of interest. He looked at Gil. You'd be Horace Gill. I would, Gil said, and I can save you considerable time. He laid his witness copy on the desk beside the original deed. I was present at the original registration. That deed is legitimate. The signature on Crawford's forgery is not Thomas Bennett's hand. I'll put that in writing right now, sign it, and you can include it in your communication to Reeves. Harper stared at the 2 documents for 3 seconds. Then he sat down, picked up his pen, and said, Somebody watch the street. Wyatt went to the window. He stood there while Harper wrote and Gil dictated, and Clara organized the documentation with the efficiency of a woman who had been building this case in her head for weeks. And he watched the street and thought about Crawford sitting in that saloon 60 yards away, buying drinks and being visible and comfortable. And the rage that moved through him was cold and exact, not hot. The kind that didn't burn out, the kind that lasted. He's coming out, Wyatt said. Everyone in the room went still. Crawford had emerged onto the saloon porch. Wyatt had never seen the man in person, but he fit the description perfectly. Mid-50s, well-dressed for a town like this, with the particular physical ease of a man accustomed to having more space than anyone else in a room. He had a lawyer beside him and 2 men behind him, and he was looking down the street in the direction of the marshal's office with the expression of a man who was calculating not whether he was going to win, but how quickly. He's going to come here, Wyatt said. He's going to come here with Adderley, and he's going to make a legal argument in front of you, Harper, that ties your hands. He can try, Harper said, without looking up from the letter. He's going to say the petition is filed. The hearing is in 2 days, and any interference with the lawful process of the court constitutes obstruction. Wyatt kept his eyes on the street. He's going to say it calmly and with documents, and he's going to be technically correct enough that you'll have to let him talk. Let him talk, Clara said. She looked up from the desk. We just need to get that letter to the Telegraph before Adderley's wire gets a response. She looked at Harper. How close are you? 5 minutes.
Wyatt, she said. He turned. You need to slow Crawford down, she said. Not stop him. Just slow him. 5 minutes. He held her eyes. 5 minutes, he said. He put on his hat and walked out the door and started down the street towards Silas Crawford. Crawford saw him coming. Of course he did. A man like Crawford always saw things coming. That was how he'd survived and grown fat for 30 years. He watched Wyatt approach with the settled expression of a man receiving a visitor he'd expected. His lawyer, Adderley, was a thin man with small glasses and the look of someone who had made a career of being underestimated. He took a half-step forward. Mr. Callahan, Crawford said, before Wyatt reached the porch steps. His voice was even and almost pleasant. I'd heard you were involved in this matter. I confess I'm surprised. I didn't think the Bennett situation had anything to do with you personally. It does now, Wyatt said. Yes, Crawford tilted his head. I imagine it does. You had men on your property last night. I apologize for that. Pruitt overstepped. He said it without any particular sincerity, just managing the conversation, moving pieces. I assure you there'll be no further trouble on your land. I appreciate that, Wyatt said. A pause. Crawford waited, because men like Crawford always let the other man fill the silence first. But I'm not here to talk about my property, Wyatt said. I'm here to tell you something, man to man. By all means. Arthur Reeves is going to come to this county. Wyatt kept his voice level and his hands still and his eyes on Crawford's face. He's going to come with a federal mandate, and he's going to look at every land transaction you've touched in the last 5 years. He's going to find the railroad survey connection. He's going to find the forgery. And he's going to find every judge and every sheriff and every clerk you've paid along the way. He paused. This isn't a threat. It's arithmetic. The documentation exists. The witnesses exist. The only question left is whether you want to be the man who kept fighting when the math was already finished, or the man who understood when a situation had run its course. Crawford looked at him for a long moment. Something moved in his eyes, not fear, something more complicated than fear. The expression of a man who is genuinely, carefully considering what he was hearing. Then he said, You're stalling. Yes, Wyatt said honestly. But everything I just told you is also true. Crawford almost smiled, not warmly, but with a kind of reluctant appreciation, the way a chess player acknowledges a move they didn't see coming, even if it doesn't change the outcome. Mr. Callahan, Crawford said, you are not the first honest man who has stood in my way. No, Wyatt said, but I might be the last one you can't move. Crawford looked at him for another 3 seconds. Then he looked past him, down the street toward the marshal's office, where the door had just opened, and Harper's deputy was walking fast toward the telegraph office with an envelope in his hand. Crawford's jaw tightened. Adderley leaned close and said something low that Wyatt couldn't catch. Crawford looked back at Wyatt. The pleasant expression was gone now, not replaced by anger, but by something harder and more honest. The face of a man dropping a performance. You've bought yourself some time, Crawford said quietly. And perhaps a federal inquiry that goes nowhere. Because federal inquiries have a way of going nowhere when the right people in Austin are paying attention to other things. Maybe, Wyatt said. But you can't know that for certain. And a man who can't know something for certain has to plan for the possibility that he's wrong.
Crawford stepped off the porch, walked past Wyatt close enough that Wyatt could have reached out and touched him. He stopped. "Give Miss Bennett my regards," Crawford said, without turning around. "And tell her that this is not finished." He walked away down the street, Adderley beside him, the two men behind him, the whole procession unhurried and deliberate, and deeply certain of itself. Wyatt stood still for a moment and let the feeling move through him. Not triumph, not relief, just the clean, hard calm of a man who had done what needed doing and was still standing afterward. Then he turned and walked back. Harper was in the doorway. Behind him, Clara and Gil stood at the desk. Clara was looking at him with those storm-gray eyes, and in them he saw everything she wasn't saying. The gratitude, the fear she hadn't let herself show, and something else, something quieter and more permanent, that had been building since the moment he pulled a canvas cloth off a woman who had stopped expecting to be saved. "Letters sent?" he asked. "Sent," Harper said. 2 minutes ago." Wyatt came inside and closed the door. "Now we wait," Harper said. "Now we wait," Clara said. But she was looking at Wyatt when she said it, and the way she was looking at him made the waiting feel like something different than it had before, like something with a shape and a weight and a future attached to it. Outside, Crawford was still in Harlow. The clock was still running. Reeves was in Austin, either reading a wire or not, either moving or sitting still. And somewhere in the distance, the summer day burned on, indifferent and absolute, the way Texas summers always did. But for the first time since he'd found her in that shed, Wyatt Callahan felt like the ground under his feet was something he'd chosen to stand on. And that made all the difference. The waiting was the hardest part. Wyatt had fought men, ridden through bad country in the dark, and stood 40 feet from Silas Crawford without flinching. And none of it had cost him the way the next 2 hours cost him. Sitting in Harper's office with the letter already sent, and Crawford somewhere in town, and Reeves somewhere in Austin, either reading a wire or not, either moving or not. That was the kind of waiting that got inside a man and took up residence. Harper's deputy, a young man named Cole, with a serious face and quick eyes, was watching the telegraph office from across the street. The saloon, the road south. Cole had instructions to come back running if anything moved. Clara sat at Harper's desk with the tin box open in front of her, and both documents laid flat. The original deed and Gil's witness copy. And she read them the way a person reads something they already know by heart. Not for information, but for reassurance. For proof that the thing was real. Gil had fallen asleep in the corner chair 20 minutes ago, upright, with his hands folded over the shotgun in his lap. And the sound of his breathing was the most peaceful thing in the room. "He said it wasn't finished," Clara said. Wyatt looked up from the window. "Crawford, what he said to you on the street." She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at the deed. "He meant it." "He did." "Even if Reeves comes, even if the federal inquiry opens and the forgery's proven and the transfer gets blocked." She stopped. "Crawford has lawyers and money and time. He can drag this out for years. He can make my life a legal nightmare until I can't afford to fight anymore." "He can try." That's not a reassuring answer. "No," he agreed. "It's not." He came away from the window and sat across from her. "But it's an honest one. And I think you've had enough people in your life give you comfortable answers that weren't true." She looked at him then. Really looked. The way she'd been doing since that first night in his kitchen. That taking measure look. Direct and serious and without any pretense to it. "What happens after this?" she said. "Assuming it goes right." "Assuming Reeves comes and the transfer's blocked and Fowler gets removed or sanctioned or whatever happens to judges who've been in someone's pocket for a decade. What happens to the land? A beat. What happens to me? You go home, he said. You rebuild what they took from your father. You do what you came from. Alone. The words sat there between them. Wyatt didn't answer right away. He turned his hat in his hands, a habit he'd had since he was young. Something his hands did when his mind was working on something it wasn't ready to say yet. You don't have to be, he said finally. Clara was quiet for a long moment. Wyatt. The door burst open. Cole came through it at a run, and one look at his face told them the comfortable part of the morning was finished. Wire came back, Cole said, breathing hard. From Austin. But it's not from Reeves. Harper was on his feet. Who? Man named Briggs. Says he's Reeves's supervisor. Cole held out the folded paper. Says Reeves is already in the field on another matter. Says the inquiry request has been logged and will be reviewed in standard order. A pause that had weight in it. Standard order is 6 to 8 weeks. 6 to 8 weeks. Wyatt heard Clara's breath go out of her. The hearing's in 2 days, she said. I know, Cole said miserably. Harper took the wire and read it himself, like he was hoping Cole had misunderstood something. His face said he hadn't. Crawford's lawyer sent his wire first, Wyatt said. He got ahead of us after all. Not necessarily. Harper set the wire down. Briggs is Reeves's supervisor, not Reeves. If Reeves is in the field and doesn't know yet, then we need to reach Reeves directly, Clara said. Not through official channels, not through Briggs. She looked at Harper. You said you know him personally. You worked a case with him 8 years ago. Is there a way to reach him that bypasses Briggs entirely? Harper was already thinking. He was working land claims in Bexar County last I heard. That's a 2-day ride. We don't have 2 days. No. Harper rubbed his jaw. But Bexar County has a telegraph. Briggs will have already sent word to Reeves's last known position, Wyatt said. Probably. But Briggs sent an official communication through official channels. That goes through the county clerk, gets sorted with the daily correspondence, sits in a pile. Harper picked up his pen. A personal wire to Reeves, marked urgent, addressed to him by name from me personally. That hits different. That's a man calling another man. That gets read first. He was already writing. I'm going to tell him everything. Not the formal request, the real version. What we have, what Crawford's doing, and what happens to this county if he doesn't come. Will it work? Clara asked. Harper looked up at her. I don't know, he said. But it's what we've got. The next hour moved like water over rock, slowly and with enormous pressure underneath. Harper sent the personal wire. Cole went back to watching the street. Gil woke up, read the situation in everyone's faces, and made coffee without being asked, which turned out to be the most useful thing anyone did in that window of time. Crawford's lawyer, Adderley, was seen going into the county clerk's satellite office that shared a building with the Harlow Post, a small jurisdiction outpost that had just enough legal function to file documents for the court in Red Rock. Cole came back to report it at 10 minutes past 10. Filing something? Wyatt asked. Looked like it, Cole said. Adderley's accelerating the petition, Harper said. He doesn't need the hearing if he can get the clerk here to certify an interim order. It's a longer shot legally, but if Fowler's already agreed to it in advance... Can he do that? Clara's voice had gone sharp. With a sympathetic enough clerk and a judge who's already decided, yes. Harper stood up. I need to get over there. I'm coming, Clara said. Clara? That is my property and my father's deed, and I am not sitting in this room while someone files papers against it 40 yards away. She had the tin box under her arm and her chin up, and the expression of a woman who was not opening this particular discussion for debate. Harper looked at her, looked at Wyatt. Wyatt picked up his rifle. "Let's go," he said. The clerk's office was small and stuffy, and smelled like old paper and ink. And when the four of them walked in, Harper with his badge, Wyatt with his rifle, Clara with her documents, and Gil with his shotgun and his lifelong surplus of fury, the young clerk behind the counter went the color of fresh chalk. Adderley was standing at the counter with a leather document case open in front of him. He looked up when they came in, and his expression did something brief and complicated before it settled back into the careful, professional blankness that was his natural resting state. "Marshal Harper," he said. "Mr. Adderley," Harper came to the counter. "I'd like to see what you're filing." "This is a routine petition. I'd like to see it." A pause. Adderley closed the document case with precise, unhurried movements. "This is a legal proceeding, Marshal. Your jurisdiction doesn't extend to—" "I'm not stopping a legal proceeding," Harper said. "I'm reviewing a document filed in a public office within my jurisdiction. That's entirely within my authority. So I'll ask one more time, and then I'll stop asking, and just stand here, until you either show it to me voluntarily, or we find out how long you're comfortable spending an afternoon next to a man with a badge and a very detailed understanding of land fraud statutes." The clerk looked at Adderley. Adderley looked at Harper. He opened the case. Harper read the top document. His face went still in a particular way. The stillness of a man who has confirmed something he already suspected, but still feels it land. "This is an emergency abandonment order," Harper said. "Signed by Fowler already. Pre-signed." He looked up at Adderley. "Judge Fowler pre-signed an abandonment order before the scheduled hearing. He has the authority to sign an order after a hearing, not before one." Harper's voice had gone very quiet. "This document is dated yesterday. The hearing is tomorrow. That is not procedure. That is a judge acting on behalf of a private party in advance of due process." He set the document on the counter. "This is evidence of judicial misconduct, Mr. Adderley. And now that I have seen it, in a public office, within my jurisdiction, you have a serious problem." Adderley's careful blankness cracked, just slightly, just at the edges, but it cracked. "The filing is legal," he said, but the certainty in his voice had thinned. "That will be for a federal examiner to determine." Harper looked at the clerk. "I need you to hold this filing. Do not process it. I am formally notifying you that this document is under review as potential evidence of judicial misconduct, and any clerk who processes it before that review is completed becomes party to the same proceeding. Do you understand me?" The clerk swallowed. "Yes, sir." "Good." Adderley picked up his document case. His jaw was tight, and his eyes were moving fast, recalculating, reassessing, the look of a lawyer whose plan had just changed shape in his hands. "Crawford will hear about this," he said. "Crawford already knows," Clara said. Everyone looked at her. She was standing very straight, the tin box against her side, and she looked at Adderley with the direct, unblinking patience of a woman who had been afraid and running and hiding for days, and had used up every last piece of that energy somewhere on a dark trail east of Harlow. "Tell him," she said. "Tell him Horace Gill has the original witness copy. Tell him we have the railroad survey connection. Tell him Arthur Reeves is coming." She paused. "And tell him that Thomas Bennett's daughter is still standing on her father's land in the eyes of the law, and she is not leaving." Adderley looked at her for a long moment. Then he picked up his case and walked out.
The response wire from Arthur Reeves arrived at 12 minutes past 2 in the afternoon. Cole came through the door of Harper's office at a dead run and put it on the table and stepped back. And everyone in the room read it over Harper's shoulder, because nobody had the patience to wait for him to read it aloud. It was short. 4 sentences. Harper, got your wire. Briggs doesn't speak for me on active fraud matters. I'm riding for Harlow. Arrive Thursday. Have your documentation ready. Thursday was 2 days away. The hearing was tomorrow. The room was very quiet for 3 seconds. Then Gil said, "Well," in the tone of a man revising his assessment of the universe. "Thursday's too late," Clara said. Her voice was steady, but her hands, Wyatt noticed, were pressed flat on the table. "The hearing's tomorrow morning." "Reeves riding for Harlow doesn't stop the hearing," Harper said. "Fowler will run his proceeding regardless. He'll push the transfer through before Reeves ever sets foot in the county." He was quiet for a moment, thinking hard and fast. Unless the hearing doesn't happen. "How do you stop a court hearing?" Wyatt asked. "You don't stop it. You move it." Harper looked up. "Fowler's in Red Rock. If I file a formal misconduct complaint against him with the district court in the next—" He checked the clock. 3 hours. The district court has the authority to issue a temporary stay on any proceedings Fowler is presiding over, pending review. He picked up his pen. "It's a long shot. The district court clerk may push back. The judge there may decide not to get involved in another county's business. But if they do issue the stay, then the hearing gets postponed until Reeves arrives and the federal inquiry is formally opened." Harper was already writing. "And once a federal inquiry is open, Fowler can't touch anything. He becomes radioactive." He paused in his writing. "I need to ride for Red Rock in the next 30 minutes. "That leaves Harlow without a marshal," Cole said. "That leaves Harlow with a deputy," Harper said, looking at him. "Which is what deputies are for." "Crawford's still in town," Wyatt said. "I know." Harper didn't stop writing. "Which is why you're staying." Harper rode out at 2:30. Crawford's men had been visible on the street throughout the afternoon. Not aggressive, not making moves, just present. The way a hand laid on a table is present, reminding everyone it was there. At 4 o'clock, Pruitt came into the marshal's office. He knocked first, which Wyatt thought said something. He stepped in, hat in hand, and looked at Clara first, and then at Wyatt, and then at Gil, who raised the shotgun approximately 4 inches from his knee and said, "State your business." "I'm not here for Crawford," Pruitt said. "You ride for Crawford," Wyatt said. "Not as of this morning." Pruitt kept his hands visible. His face had the hollowed-out look of a man who'd made a large and irreversible decision and was still metabolizing the weight of it. "I sent a letter to Crawford before noon. Told him I was done." "Why?" Clara said. Pruitt looked at her. "Because he told me last night that if the federal inquiry opened, he wanted me to make sure certain witnesses didn't make it to Austin." A pause. "I've done bad work for Crawford. I've known it was bad work. But I am not going to do that." The room was quiet. "Who are the witnesses?" Wyatt asked. "Gil." Pruitt looked at the old man. "And the woman." Clara didn't move, but something in her face went very still, the way still water goes still when something passes under it. "He's going to move tonight," Pruitt said, "before Reeves gets here, before the district court can act on Harper's complaint. He's calculated that eliminating the witness testimony eliminates the case, and he's willing to do it." He set his hat on the table and looked at Wyatt directly. "He's got 3 men left. 2 of the 4 from your ranch that night are in bad shape. You did that.
but he picked up 2 more when he came into Harlow.
Total of 3, plus Crawford himself, who was a better shot than he looks.
"You're telling us this? Why?" Clara asked. "Because I told you I was tired," Pruitt said. "And because Thomas Bennett was a good man, and I watched Crawford destroy him for 2 years, and I did nothing, and I am not doing nothing again." He looked at the table. "And because if Reeves comes and opens this inquiry, I intend to talk to him. Everything I know. 11 years of everything." He paused. "That means I need the inquiry to actually happen." Wyatt studied him. "Where?" Wyatt said. "He'll wait until after dark. Come at the office direct. He knows you're here, knows Harper's gone, knows it's a deputy and a rancher and an old man." Pruitt pulled out the chair across from Wyatt and sat down heavily. He thinks he's still got enough force to end this tonight. Gill set his shotgun across his knees and said, very calmly, "Let him come." They prepared for 2 hours. Cole barricaded the back approach. Wyatt took the window facing the street. Gill, who turned out to know more about defensive positions than his age suggested, placed himself at the side door with the shotgun and the particular stillness of a man who had made peace with whatever the night was going to ask of him. Clara refused to be put in the back room. "I'm not hiding again," she said. The small pistol was in her hand. "I am done hiding." Wyatt looked at her for a moment. Then he handed her the extra ammunition from his belt without a word. She loaded it without a word back. They waited. At 9:15, Crawford came. He didn't sneak. That was the first thing. He came straight down the middle of the street with his 3 men behind him, and he walked like a man who had decided that subtlety was finished and force was the only language left. He stopped in the street in front of the marshal's office and said, loudly, clearly, with the voice of a man who'd stopped performing patience, "Callahan, send the woman out. Send the old man out. You and the deputy walk away, and this is finished tonight." Wyatt opened the window. "No," he said. A beat. "I have 3 men," Crawford said. "I know. And you have a deputy and a rancher and Dale Pruitt," Wyatt said. The silence that followed that had a texture to it. Wyatt felt it even from inside. Crawford processed this for 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, something happened in his face that was the realest thing Wyatt had seen from the man. A flash of genuine surprise, followed by something that looked almost like injury, betrayal. The look of a man who had trusted in money and leverage for 30 years and had just discovered that neither of them was sufficient. "Dale," Crawford said. His voice changed now, quieter, almost personal. Pruitt stepped into the window frame beside Wyatt. 11 years, Silas," Pruitt said. "I stayed 11 years. But you crossed a line tonight that I told you I wouldn't cross." Crawford stared at him for a long moment. Then his hand moved. It was fast, faster than a man his age and his shape of life should have been. And the first shot came through the window, and Wyatt dropped below the sill and came up firing. And the night went completely apart. It lasted 4 minutes. 4 minutes of shots and shouts and breaking glass, and Cole taking a graze on his left arm that he didn't notice until it was over, and Pruitt pulling one of Crawford's hired men down from his horse in the street. 4 minutes of Clara keeping the side door, while Gill's shotgun spoke twice with an authority that settled the back approach permanently. And then it was quiet. Wyatt came out the front door. Crawford was in the street. He was on his knees, not shot, not down, but on his knees with Pruitt's boot on his rifle hand and his lawyer's careful professional composure completely and finally gone. He was breathing hard and looking at the ground, and for the first time in all of this, Silas Crawford looked exactly like what he was, a man who had run out of moves. Cole put the irons on him. Crawford didn't resist. He just looked up once at the door of the marshal's office, where Clara Bennett stood with the pistol still in her hand, and her chin up and her gray eyes on him. And whatever he saw in her face, dignity or refusal, or the absolute undefeated quality of someone who has been through everything he could throw at her and is still there, whatever it was clearly not what he had expected to see. He looked away first.
Arthur Reeves rode into Harlow on Thursday morning. He was a compact, precise man in his late 40s, with a leather document case, and the expression of someone who arrived at situations expecting to find them complicated and was rarely disappointed. Harper met him at the edge of town, and they rode in together, and by the time Reeves dismounted in front of the marshal's office, he already knew the broad shape of things. Crawford was in the Harlow jail. 2 of his men were with him. Adderley had ridden out of town the morning after the street confrontation and had not come back, a move that Reeves noted in his document case with the dispassionate attention of a man building a record. Reeves sat at Harper's table for 6 hours that Thursday. He talked to Harper. He talked to Gill. He talked to Pruitt for 2 hours, during which time nobody else was in the room. And when Pruitt came out, he looked like a man who had set down a weight he'd been carrying so long he'd stopped feeling it until it was gone. He talked to Clara last. Wyatt sat outside the closed door and waited. And when the door finally opened and Reeves came out, the federal examiner looked at Wyatt with the evaluating eyes of a man who had been doing this work for 20 years and could read a situation to its bones. "You're the rancher," Reeves said. "Yes, sir." "You want to know what I told her?" he said. "I want to know if it's good news. The deed is legitimate. Gill's testimony is solid. Pruitt's cooperation gives us the full financial chain, the forgery, the railroad connection, the payments to Holt and Fowler." Reeves closed his document case with a crisp snap. "Crawford is not going to be a free man for a long time, Mr. Callahan. The Bennett land is not going anywhere, and Judge Fowler is about to have an extremely unpleasant autumn." Wyatt let out a slow breath. "And Miss Bennett?" he said. Reeves looked at him the way people look at someone who has already answered their own question and just hasn't recognized it yet. "Go talk to her," Reeves said simply, and walked away down the hall. She was standing at the window of the back room with the tin box in her hands and her eyes on the street. And when Wyatt came in, she turned, and what was in her face was something he hadn't seen there before. Something lighter than everything she'd been carrying, and more fragile, and more real. "It's over," she said. "It's over." She looked down at the tin box. "I'm going home." She said it like she was testing the words, making sure they held weight. "I'm actually going home." "You are." She looked up at him. Her eyes were bright in a way that had nothing to do with tears and everything to do with the particular quality of a person who has come through something long and hard and is standing on the other side of it, still intact. "You could come," she said, "if you wanted." He was quiet for a moment. "You said that like a question," he said, "but it didn't sound like one." The corner of her mouth moved. "Maybe it's both." He crossed the room and took the tin box from her hands and set it on the table, and when he turned back, she was looking at him with those gray eyes that had been frightened and calculating and furious and grieving and determined across 5 days that felt like a lifetime. And what was in them now was something simpler and more honest than all of those things combined. "Yes," he said, "I'll come." She reached up and took hold of the front of his shirt with one hand, not pulling, just holding, the way a person holds something they've decided belongs to them, and leaned her forehead against his shoulder
for exactly one breath. Just one. Then she stepped back and picked up the tin box, and her chin went up in that way it did, and she said, "Then let's go home," and walked out the door ahead of him, steady and sure, the way she had done everything. The Bennett land was waiting. The summer sun was burning over a county that was about to change, over a road that led home, over a woman who had refused to be taken, and a man who had chosen to stay. And that choice, made in the dark of a summer shed over a canvas cloth and a pair of storm-gray eyes, had turned out to be the most important thing either of them had ever done. Clara Bennett went home to her father's land, and she kept it, and she was never alone on it again.